Well, hello everybody and welcome back to another midweek edit. This morning we've got Willow for company. Hopefully she'll be a good girl and she won't bark if anybody comes. I'm only showing you because there's every chance that she might. Anyway, so cast your mind back a week or so ago. I was in a meadow. I didn't go into the woodland. I decided to shoot the wildflowers that were growing there. 3 images in total. The one that I've chosen is of a white clover, and if you remember, all the shots on that particular day were handheld. Now, I had thought that I would do a single frame, an edit of a single frame, but what I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to attempt to do a stack, because I've got 4 frames all photographed at different focusing points within the flowering head, and it would seem a shame not to try and get a final frame with sharpness throughout. Now, if you just go onto Lightroom now, and I will just quickly zoom through these frames, and you'll see that each one, the flower has moved ever so slightly. I just go back, and that's obviously a consequence of hand holding the camera in an awkward position, which is what I was in at the time, sort of crouched down, bent over, holding quite a heavy camera system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 4 frames and we'll get into the editing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the black and the white point, and if you look at the histogram at the top, whilst I hold down the Alt key on the Mac and click the black, you will see, if I move it to the left there, you'll see the blue channel just starting to clip there, and I'll bring that back so it's free from the edge. Let go of the Alt key, that's the black set. Alt key down again, click on the whites, and I'll just move it over to the right so you can see them there burning out, and bring them back. Now what I always do is I always just pull it back that little bit more, because it tends to soften up the highlights. I don't like them bright whites, especially in botanical pictures. I like them a little bit softer, a little bit darker. Looking at the overall image, first thing I think is that it looks a little bit lackluster. It needs some contrast, it needs some brightness, so brighten the overall scene, just keeping an eye on those whites, just pull those whites back a bit more. And I think that's pretty much how I remember it. It's what I like. Everything looks nice and vibrant. I am just going to boost the contrast a little bit, which makes those greens a little bit too green in my opinion, but the contrast is nice. The highlights, the whites, still again need controlling. Just going to bring them back. If you just zoom in there and you can see where it came from, that's where it was. They're a little bit too bright there, so I'll just pull that back a little bit, and that's looking quite nice. What I've just realised that I've done is I'm only adjusting one, so I'm just going to click the first thumbnail on the left there and select them all and just sync those up, and that's syncing everything together. And I'm just going to turn the auto sync on, which is what I should have done in the first place. Right, so now that I've had a couple of seconds to look away from it, I am just going to lift it all back up just a touch more and just bring those highlights down. You see there the little banner that says highlights updated for 4 images, which shows that the auto sync is working nicely. So the question I'm asking myself now is, are those greens too green? Do I want to pull them back a little bit? I don't think I mind the greens being as vibrant as they are, but what I might just do is nip into Colour Mixer and just look at the hue of the green, and I might just change it ever so slightly to a green that's not quite so yellow. So happy with that. I'm just going to go into the basics panel, and I'm just going to lower the saturation down ever so slightly and cool off the colour temperature ever so slightly, and I think we're about there. That looks very, very natural to me. Now I do like these little blushed areas within the Clover, so I'm just going to nip back into the colour mixer, just go to the saturation, and just going to lift those reds and oranges. The purple and magenta, which hasn't really had much of an effect, I have to say. So what I'll do is I'll just pick up this colour selection tool here, and I'll just click on that and lift it, and you see it's actually the yellow that's gone up, just to increase that. You see there on the right hand side, the yellow's crept up. Right, I'm happy with all of that. Now there are a couple of little stems that I am going to get rid of that I'm not keen on. These little patches here and here, these burnt stems, damaged stems, which aren't really adding any value to the image. Now I'm not going to do that in Lightroom. I like to do that in Photoshop, but you can do it in Lightroom if you want to. I do like all these specular highlights, they're very nice. It shows that the grass was wet on the day. So let's nip this into Photoshop. Edit, open as layers in Photoshop. Now some people might like to use smart objects. I'm not really into those. I find them a little bit too complicated for my level of editing. I keep things very, very traditional in my Photoshop sense. Right, so there we have all 4 frames into Photoshop in the layers palette on the right hand side. So I'm going to select all, and this will be the big test. Edit, auto align layers. What are going to be the chances? Here goes. So that seems to have done that, so I'm going to just quickly test that by just turning each layer off. Turn that one on, that one off. And it seems to have done a remarkable job, which I'm amazed by. Now, if you remember the film, I didn't do any focusing points on the stack of the rear end of the flower. They were basically all of the front edge here, and also at the back, at the center point of the flower. So I don't have any of these rear portions of the flower at all, but I'm happy with that. I'm happy for it to fall off into the distance. So the next step is to go back to the Edit tab. Oh, sorry, I need to select all. Go back to the Edit tab and Auto Blend Layers. You'll have seen me do this before. Now while that's doing that, one thing to point out with focus stacking, and particularly with something like this, and I have to say I didn't do it on the day, is it's worth bearing in mind the focus breathing, especially when the alignment is going to be so far out, because I'm now going to have to take a significant crop off the edge of my frame. But because this Clover's got so much room around it, it doesn't matter. But if you've aligned your frame up with critical parts of the image right close to the edge, you might be in trouble, and you might end up cropping too tightly and making the composition feel awkward. So bear that in mind when you've got something like a stack like this where you're hand holding and there's a lot of movement as you're taking the frames. Allow for some extra cropping room on the sides. So that seems to have done that. Now for safety on this occasion, I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to duplicate these 4 layers because I want some backup in the event that the focus stack has done a poor job in certain areas. Now, like I said, the rear portion of the flower is soft anyway. I never did any focusing points on that, so I'm going to be happy with that. Don't mind that at all. But let's go in and just look at this top frame here. and see if there's anywhere that's not stacked too well. Now I can see there's a little patch here, but I think that's the rear portion of the flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn these 4 off, go back through them individually and just look to see if this portion here becomes sharp on any of those, which means that the image above will have masked out an area where an image below would have otherwise been sharp. But I don't think it's making any difference. I think Photoshop has done a sterling job there, and I'm overall happy with what it's done. I'll just have a quick look over here. Turn them all off individually. Now this little point here, as you can see, isn't sharp. The focus has missed that area, the frames that I've taken, but no matter which one I put on, it's not making any difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ditch. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flatten the whole thing, just to make the file a lot smaller. It's gone down to 604 megabytes. Let's just have a look what it was before. Well, it's 6.3 gigabytes overall. Which is enormous. Don't want to be handling that sort of file for any longer than I need to. You can just see a bit of noise in the middle there. I was shooting at 800 ISO, so that's to be expected. So I'm happy with that. That looks really nice, and at this viewing distance the Clover looks amply sharp enough. Very happy with that as a shot. As I say, we just need to now crop the edge, and I'm going to be quite ruthless with this. I take a good proportion off because the flower is still in a nice position. It's got that negative space on the left to move into that I mentioned on the film. Just double click that, and there we have the cropped version. Now I did mention in Lightroom these areas here which I need to get rid of. So I use 2 methods with this being a spot remove tool and just paint over the offending articles. Very, very easy. This one's a little bit bigger on the left hand side, but it should disappear quite easily because it's out of focus and there's nothing intersecting it. Yep. Now this last one, a little bit more tricky because I don't want it to have a missing stem. We're going to end up with a grass stem floating in midair. Let's just do it to see how it copes, because sometimes a little AI removal tool does a better job with things like this. Yeah, you can see there we've got a gap. So let's go to the history and we'll just move that back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this selection tool here. I'm just going to paint over it and then use the generative fill. I'm not going to fill anything into the box here. I'm just going to click generate. Now that's put a stem in. You can see that's much better. It's not perfect, so I will just cycle through the options. Nope. That one's better, but the water droplet doesn't look real. So I'm going to go with that. I have got the option of redoing it if I wanted to. Just put that back in the middle. I could redo the generative fill and see if it gives me a better option, but I think I'm happy with that, and I don't think anyone would really find that a problem on the image. So last thing to do, just go back to layer again and flatten that. And there we have the final frame. So I will put that on now. I hope you found it useful, and that's the end of the midweek edit. So I will leave it there. So thank you all ever so much for watching again, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.